Hello, everyone. Welcome. Happy Friday. Welcome to another episode of Coaches Corner Health. I am one of your co-hosts, Leslie Godet. I'm a mindset and emotional awareness coach, and I work with women who are on a mission to change the world. I show them that you can actually love what you do in your corporate job. Yes, you do not have to choose between being an employee and an entrepreneur. I show them how they can actually maybe even add something much more life changing in their spiritual vision of pursuing a passion project. I show that it's possible to actually do both, whether it's living as an employee, an entrepreneur, or an employee and adding something of more passion to their life that they don't have to choose, because when they develop a very beautiful, unstoppable mindset, learn how to manage their emotions, which in turn protects their time, that it's possible for them to keep doing what they love, for them to get things done more efficiently and timely, and pursue adding more that lights them up. And guess what the cherry on, or the icing on top of the cake is? They still have time to spend QT with their loved ones. Over to you, Andy.
I love that. It never gets old. Hi, everybody. I'm Andy Lidstone. I'm the unconditional coach. I help people with boundaries. I help people figure out control issues. I help people figure out how to manage relationships. I help people figure out how to set and hold boundaries with themselves and with other people. Thank you for tuning in today. We have a wonderful conversation ahead of us. And I know for myself, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Last week, we started talking about children and what it's like to be a child and how we can help empower them. This week, we're going to start a conversation on what it's like to be a teenager. And we're going to talk about a little bit about what's in the mind of a teenager and what it's like to be a teenager, a bit about our own experiences, and a little bit about the people, the teenagers that we've interacted with throughout the years, throughout our lives. First of all, let me just say thank you, Leslie, for sharing this conversation with me. I get excited every time I think of a topic that you and I are going to discuss together, because we have some wonderful things come out of our conversations. So thank you so much for having this conversation with me. What's your thoughts? What's your thoughts on what it's like to be a teenager, or what was like to be a teenager? I mean, it was only a couple of days ago now, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it was just last week? Well, you would think that I was still a teenager based on some of the things that I do. But anyhow, that's for a different conversation altogether. But yeah, I actually do love these conversations, just because not only do we get to share our experiences and we get to know each other more. And this is one of the things that I love about this collaboration, but there's such great value that I gain from these conversations and learning about, just revisiting things that I've experienced, getting to know the things that you've experienced, and, some of the things that we've had as challenges. So today, talking about being a teenager, gosh, oh my goodness. One of the things I've found being, as I remember back, I reflect back, is I always felt like I had to be right. Always trying to win that argument. And I think as a teenager, especially when our parents are trying to show us the way, or they're trying to say, hey, look, we've been here, we've been down that road before. And you really want to say, but you don't really understand because you're not me. And that's yes and no answer. Yes, your parents aren't you, but they also know what it's like to have walked in your shoes as the teenager themselves at one point, and the life lessons that they've learned. And so when I look back and I think about the conversations I had with my mom, because I grew up in a single family home, she was really, what I really loved about it was that she's very open to letting me talk to her about anything. So anything at all. And that was really empowering, because we didn't always see eye to eye, but knowing that the door was always open to have a conversation, that was really important to me. And so that's a really good memory I have of being a teenager. But honestly, if you were to ask me to look into the minds of teenagers today, I think it would be a little bit more difficult for me. I think just because I've been far removed from it, but I also know that different. It's just a different way of growing up today. Like the things that that the kids today get, that they're given access to was brand new to me when I was in an adult life, like with the computer and with the internet. I grew up with, like even like the colored TV that we had, the black and white for a while. So yeah, I'm dating myself. Yes, I'm a child of the 60s. So a lot of the things that kids grew up with today, like I didn't grow up with those handheld games. I was out playing outside with my friends. So being a teenager to me is completely different, and yet it's the same. We still have emotions. So yeah, I'm excited to dig into the topic.
Yeah. It was the same with me. We started with black and white TV as well, and we also didn't have computers and internet and social media and video games and all that stuff. Now I was and still am an early adopter for those kinds of things. I was the one that was always wanting to be into computers, and I went to a school that was one of the first ones in the region that got computers, and to this day that school is still one of the most technologically advanced schools in the region. So we adopted them early, and of the people who got into computers in that school, I was one of the first ones to get into computers in that school. So, I was still early into that stuff, but it still happened, in my teenage years is when they started getting computers, right? So that's when I started realizing that there's a world outside of just going outside to play, was as a teenager. And I started to delve into that world because for me, going outside to play, being social with the kids that I could meet and see in my neighborhood was hard. I didn't make any friends. I didn't have friends as a child. I didn't have friends as a teenager. I didn't make friends very well. I was so socially awkward. I made people feel uncomfortable when I was around. So much so that they didn't want to be around me, or if I was around, they would want to pick on me a lot. So when I got into computers, for me, it was a bit of a different experience than it was for a lot of people. But the topic I wanted to talk about today wasn't so much technology or our ways around it, or so much about whether or not the teenagers today have it different than teenagers of previous generations. It's more like what I wanted to talk about is one of the things that we seem to miss generation after generation after generation with teenagers, and that's that they don't know what the hell's going on from day to day. They don't know what's going on in their own head, in their own heart, and their own desires and their own values. They don't know how to transition from being a child to being an adult, and it takes a lot of years to do that. And there's a lot of confusion in that process. And I remember thinking every day something different. And by that, I mean, I'll give an example. As many teenage boys were trying to do, I was trying to find a young girl to date. Somebody that I could care for, somebody that would care for me, and somebody we could share time with. And each day when I went to school or even on the weekends, every day I would have a different value that I would promote because my experiences from the day before would change what I thought, how I felt. My values changed, my desires changed, what I thought was good for me changed on a daily basis. And it was really hard for me at that point to figure out what I wanted, because what I wanted changed all the time. And much like you said a few minutes ago, my mom was very open to talking. I could talk to her about anything. And although technically I had a dad in my life, he was never home. He was gone for months at a time. And when he came home, he usually came home long enough to pack his truck and go out west, go camping in the mountains. So he wasn't available to, us kids or to his wife, my mom. So although we did have a dad, we were raised more like a single mom situation. And therefore, she was the one we talked about. We never talked about my dad, or we never talked to my dad. We talked to my mom. And being the oldest, I talked to her most. She wanted to she kept me up an hour later than my siblings, and we talked, and I could talk to her about anything. The problem, though, is that each day I would have a different thing that I wanted, a different thing that I was considering, a different thing that I was, chasing after. So from day to day, it was very hard for me to communicate to her who I was and what I wanted, because from day to day, it changed in a big way. And I think that's one of the things that we miss when we're talking about teenagers and talking to teenagers, is that day to day, they don't know what they're doing and what they want. Although they don't know that themselves. They believe they know everything. I believed, and I didn't. So that was a surface belief. I remember going to stay with my grandparents one summer, and every time they gave me a piece of advice or a suggestion, or, you could try this, or have you thought about that? Or, this isn't really working for you. I would say, yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. It became a default response. Yeah, I know. And then my grandparents or my grandfather got mad at me one day and said, if you know so much, then why aren't you doing those things? I'm like, because I don't know. Right? Because I don't know what to do. So that's just an example of what it was like to be a teenager, as far as we were always confused. And by always, that's an overextension. I never stopped wanting to have a girlfriend. I stopped what girl I wanted to date. I changed what girl I wanted to date. I changed what neighborhood I wanted to find them in. I changed what, social group I wanted to find them in. But I never changed wanting to date a girl. So some things change and some things don't. And we ourselves can't predict which is going to change from day to day. So that was my experience. And there's a lot more to it than that, but I want to get some of your experience out of that too. How much did your bright mind change when you were going through life?
So for me, I really actually was pretty social growing up. Like, I had a lot of friends. So I played with the kids in the neighborhood, but the thing for me, and I think the reason why I was so social, is because I was trying to hang on to something. My mom, for whatever reason, I really still don't even know today what the reason is. I think partly has to do with my oldest brother, but we ended up moving a lot. And so I was changing school districts, changing. I mean, we lived in Ontario. We lived in the metropolitan Toronto area, but we ended up moving from, place to place, far enough away that I had to change schools. And so, of course, I would lose friendships and have to start over. And so for me, I was always really social, getting out there and getting, finding new people to attach myself to. So I didn't feel, like alone, because I really like, and even still to this day, I really like being around people.
Yeah.
And I've never really had a hard time meeting and making friends, but I think for me, because we moved so much, it was hard to keep long-term friends. Even now, I think the way I live my life, I actually have long-term friends, but I don't really see those people. So a lot I've noticed lately of being very, recognizing that a lot of my interactions now have been online. So, well, that's for another conversation. But as a child, I think for me as a teenager, my experience around, changing my mind, I didn't really I don't really have a memory around changing my mind daily or a lot. It was more about just being curious of doing new things and meeting new people, and just hanging out with new people. I think the only time that really became apparent to me was when I was in my late teens, where I felt almost, for lack of a better term, is I almost felt bored with the friendships that I had. I didn't feel I was being, I didn't feel like I was really being, like stretched. I didn't feel, and I mean, that's the word I'm using today. I don't know what word I would use back then, but I just didn't feel like I was getting enough out of the friendships that I had. And don't get me wrong, they were great people, but I felt bored. And so I ended up going out and looking for the wrong crowd because I thought, well, they'd be more exciting. So I guess I wasn't getting that excitement. So I that's really kind of the only time I really did end up changing my mind that I can recall is around what I was doing, and that was I wanted to be excited more. I wanted to have some kind of form of excitement, and to me, that was hanging out with the kids that were, not so much getting into trouble, but they like to smoke joints, they like to party. That was what I was looking for, excitement. And it wasn't necessarily that I became a big party girl, but I don't know, I just felt like I wanted to be in that scene, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
So yeah, that's my only recollection.
Yeah. And for me, I also moved around a lot. We were in different schools almost every year. And I found it much more difficult to make friends. My brother and my sister were the same. My siblings were the same. We were all part of the socially outcast groups of people in every school that we went to, just because we didn't know how to have social skills, right? And I think that's part of why we changed so much as teenagers, is because we were trying to fit in, and what we were doing didn't work. So all the time I was trying to change what I was doing to try and fit in and try and fit in and try and fit in. And what I've experienced with teenagers since that day is most teenagers spend their teenage years trying to fit in somewhere. Whether it's trying to fit in at the job they have, the weekend or evening job that they have, or whether it's trying to fit in with their family, or whether it's trying to fit in with, a social group at school, or in some other kind of a social situation. They're trying to become a part of something, and either their circumstances change, so they got to find something else to be a part of, or they become disillusioned or bored, or somehow they don't like the people they've been hanging around with, so they try and hang around with somebody different. I've only actually met one person besides yourself who grew up with the same people and didn't want to change much as he grew up. Most of the people that I've experienced as they were teenagers, they were changing their minds a lot about what they wanted, what they were doing. Whether they liked math class or English class, whether they liked, sports or board games, or whether they liked, to go outside or to stay at home and watch TV, or whether they wanted to hang around with this friend or that friend, or whether they wanted to go to, the swimming pool, or whether they wanted to go to the movies. A lot of people that I knew were, as teenagers, were changing their minds a lot because, as I mentioned before, we're trying to figure out who we are. And when we were children, we were told who we were because our parents would observe the things that we like, and they would tell us, oh, well, this is what you like, so this must be who you are. And then I think one of the definitions of teenagers is that we eventually start to take some control of that and decide, well, no, that's not who I am. This is who I am. And then we make a declaration, and then we decide, actually, I don't like that declaration, but I can't rescind on that. I can't renege on that. So then we swim around in our head because I've made a declaration that I now don't associate with anymore. And by the time I actually figure out another declaration, I've changed my mind 5, 6, 7 times in my head. And then I declare, no, I'm this right now. And I've seen that in other teenagers, and I've even seen it displayed in media about teenagers on movies and things about how they're changing their mind all the time. So that's one of the things that I wanted to address on this particular episode is what it's like to try and fit in, to try and figure out who I am. What is the process of figuring out how to be an adult like? Going from being told who we are to figuring out who we are as adults. What's that process like? What was that like for you?
For me, gosh. Okay, so the biggest thing that comes to mind for me is I didn't like change very much. I
Mhm.
did not respond well to change, especially when it came to structured environments. So, school, for example, was a structured environment, and I did well in school when there was structure. And I loved actually going to school. I mean, that was something that I really truly enjoyed doing. But what I found was when you're in like junior high school, you still have that structure. You go to your homeroom, they take attendance, and pretty much any class you're in, they're taking attendance, making sure that you're present. They are more invested in making sure that you're showing up so that you are getting the education. They want to obviously get you moved through, and they don't want you to have to be held back, and or fail. So I ended up, I did enjoy school in that capacity. But then when I went off to high school, I got to make a choice. I went to art school first. It was sort of an art school. It was for an art program. I was very much into drawing and sketching and, making things with my hands. And I was recruited to go to George Vanier, which is in Toronto. And I was very lonely because all of my friends went to the other school that was closer in my district. I was brought out of my school district to go there specifically for my talents, but I didn't thrive.
Right.
And there wasn't that structure other than I had set curriculum that I had to go through, but they weren't really like they wanted you to be there, but they were giving you more freedoms to be an adult to have the choice to show up.
Right.
But I did not enjoy the experience because I felt all alone. And
Right.
for the first time, I didn't really feel like I was making the friends that I typically usually do. I didn't feel comfortable. I wasn't confident. So I ended up finishing my grade 10 and moved to finish out the last two grades at the school where all of my friends went, and I was instantaneously happy.
Right.
But within that environment, there still was that one thing that to me I was missing, which was that structure. And I know some of my friends did not take school as seriously as I did, and I ended up having one course. It was English, and it was 1 year that I had been kind of like missing out on classes, and because I was being with my friends, I wasn't doing anything necessarily, but I was
Right.
out with my friends. I fell human, I guess, to the draw of like skipping class.
Yeah.
And one day turned into another day, turned into a couple of days, turned into a couple of weeks. And then
Right.
finally I felt so guilty and so empty and lost. And I went to the teacher. Now, his response at first wasn't good. It was not a good one because he
Right.
shut me down and made me feel less than. And I ended up walking away. But what was really great about this teacher is that he actually found me later. He realized that young people make mistakes,
Right.
and he apologized, and he said, I realized that I was really out of line to really put you. I understand you. It took guts to come back after 2 weeks and just say you were skipping, right?
Right. Right.
So I ended up finishing and graduating and, passing I had really good grades. I made up for what I had, missed, and was able to like get my grades back up. But I still felt like the structure part of it was extremely difficult not having.
Right.
Made life, even to this, to until I really started to embrace, even in like my career as being in law, just to give you an example of how that impacted my life, was up until maybe, I don't know, 10 to 15 years ago, being in my law career, that the structure piece I counted on. And when it started changing up, And part of it had to do, well, really for the past 26 years, I've been kind of moving from place to place, but not necessarily living in Canada. I've been living in the States as well. They have a different type of system down there. My structure changed, but then on top of the structure, the dynamics of how employer employee, how it used to be like we're a team, it became more of you just get this amount of work. I'm going to pile this on. We're going to change your job at description at any moment. The dynamics of things changed. And so the structure there, I did not like. So change was a thing for me that was, until I learned to embrace that change is going to happen and be open to it. And that allowed to freed me from the fear of change. But again, the structure piece as well. Again, if you don't deal with that at some point, I think that it can impact you like it did for me. So that's how I dealt with it.
I agree. And for me, structure had the opposite effect. And I like that you brought that up, because a lot of adults try and offer a solution for all the teenagers they know. You know, all teenagers need more structure. All teenagers need more freedom. All teenagers need more this, more that. Well, actually, that's BS. All teenagers, like all adults, like all children, need what's unique to them. And for me, structure was dangerous. The more structured I got, the more rebellious I got. The more somebody tried to stick me into a system, the more I wanted out of the system. The more as I got into high school, and had the freedom to choose my classes and which courses I took, and we had, like you said, we had the curriculum we had to follow, but there was more and more freedom as to when we took those courses and how often we took them, and which optional courses we could take, and that sort of stuff as we got into high school. And the more freedom I got with that, the more I just didn't show up for class. I didn't have friends that I was hanging out with. I wasn't distracted by, being social. I would go and wander around the forests and the parks and the walking trails and the bike trails, and I would be gone. We bused into school, so I would get off the bus, go into the school, put my school stuff in my locker, and I would disappear. I wouldn't go to class. I would go wandering around, because it was a country school. The school had all kinds of parks and walking trails and stuff right beside it. Right, like half of them went through the schoolyard. So I would just disappear into the forest and into the trails, and I'd come back at lunchtime, eat my lunch, alone by myself, but around the other kids, and then I'd disappear again before lunch was over. I'd be gone. For some reason, I didn't pass any of my classes that year. I don't know why, but I would be gone. I was gone. I'm saying I'm going to skip more than half my classes that year. I did show up for some of them, but I skipped more than half of them. And that's because I was being told, or I felt it was because I was being told who I wanted to be or who I had to be. And by high school, I'd had enough. Like you said, in junior high, we're kind of given a few options. We're given a little bit of freedom. They want us to start making some choices. We have a few options of what we can take, but there's still a lot of structure. And as you get into high school, there's less and less structure. They give us more and more options. And although I wasn't in an art school, I was in a school that was a little more open-minded about letting the kids do what they wanted. And especially in high school, I just didn't want to be there. What I wanted was to find a life that wasn't what somebody else made me be. I wanted to find something that I belonged to. Now, much like yourself, as you got into your career and found structure, that structure had an influence on your life. My desire to escape structure also had an influence on my life. I had a tough time finding employment. I didn't want a job. I didn't want to work for somebody else. I didn't want to be in the system. neat thing about that, though, if you don't have a job, you don't get stuff like a house and food and a family. Right? Weird. So I didn't want to be in the system, but it means I also didn't get the perks of being in the system. Right? I struggled making a living. I struggled surviving. I struggled being, I was homeless a lot for those first 10 years after high school because I just didn't want to be a part of the system. And I didn't know how to participate in the requirements of the system without being a part of the system. And it's not something I ever wanted. So fast forward to recently, and I found a way to live outside the system and still participate in the economy. And that's what I'm doing, building a life that fits the non-structured system that I want, which really leads into what you and I coached. I coach freedom, you coach structure. I mean, that's not actually what we coach, but there's a little bit to that, right?
Well, I truly believe that there actually is freedom in structure, meaning, and I'm talking around time, like how you use your time. It's not necessarily that every aspect of your life has to be structured in a way that, you have a checklist. This is how you go through life. No, for me, it's about having some kind of, having some kind of structure, like what I'm going to do, especially when it comes to business through the week, how I'm going to show up, what does that look like? And that gives me true freedom, because then I can see what it is I have to play with, like what cards I have. And then I can be flexible. It's not that they're rigid and set in stone, but it gives me more freedom to have that structure.
And it's the same thing with my freedom. I found that as I gain more freedom, I'm able to do the things that I want to do and structure them so that I get them done. Because my freedom wasn't accomplishing SFA. I wasn't getting anything done. Weird that, that pattern of high school would translate to the rest of my life. So go to school. It does help you, be functional to the rest of your life. And so that's what I found as a teenager. As I was changing what I wanted all the time. I was always trying to figure out where I fit. And even when I found someplace I thought I fit, I didn't like it. Right? And this is kind of what I'm trying to get to, and why I love this conversation, because although when you and I have a lot of similar values, how we approached our teenage years was quite different. How we experienced our teenage years was quite different. And yet here we are in our adult life helping people. So what the message I'd kind of like to our audience to hear from this is, there isn't a recipe for helping your teenager get through those years. What there is a way to allow them to do what they want to do, even when they don't know what the hell that is. Right? Trying to say, oh, you're into hockey this year. Great. We'll do hockey for the rest of your life. If they're into hockey this year, great. If they're into hockey next year, great. If they're into hockey the year after that, great. If they're not, do something else.
Yeah.
Right? Learn how to understand, and this is a key skill for all relationships. And if you teach your teenager how to do this, it'll be for the rest of their life. Learn how to listen to them in a minute by minute, day by day, week by week basis, because their minds can change. What they want can change and does change. And they don't even know what it is half the time. Okay. So trying to ask your teenager, what do you want? What are you trying to do here? Well, they might give you an answer that'll be completely different tomorrow or next week or next month. That doesn't mean, just because they give you an answer, doesn't mean that answer is going to last for any longer than a couple of minutes.
Yeah. The funny thing is too, and I think this can blow, at least it blows my mind when I think about it. But if you grow up in the same household and your brothers and sisters experience the same experiences as you, their perception is going to be completely different. And that's just what is so fascinating to me, because what do you mean this happened? and this is how it, and they're like, well, no, but this happened, but this is really what it meant. And we have our own perception. We are different. Yes. So again, you may have looked at structure as being restrictive. I looked at structure as being freeing.
Right.
We still get to the same place, but it's just, we're individual. And I think that's what is so important for people to understand, is that when you have kids that are going through these ups and downs, they want this today, they don't want it tomorrow, they change their mind like they're on a dime, and it could be frustrating. But I think if you approach this from this perspective when they're younger, it allowing them to, like, bring them through their ideas, talk to them about what they're thinking about, what they really actually believe that they want, and work with them as they go through their teenagers, as they get older, and still continue the conversation. Like, let's, even if it's like, what, it's family time. We do this once every other weekend. We're going to talk about our values, or we're going to talk about our dreams, our goals. And you can do that from when they're young enough, they're old enough, where they're starting to dream and talk to you about, what they want to do. Like, they start talking about what they want to do because they get influenced by things that they see that inspires them. So start talking to them and asking them what they want to do, and start having conversations around it. Like, even if your child says to you out of the blue, I want to be a scientist. Well, if they've got their hands in and they're doing things with Play-Doh, or those science projects that, those toys, or those kits that you can bring home and they can, make a volcano and things like that. If that's what they're doing and they seem excited about it, why don't you continue the conversation? Let's talk about this fascination you have with science.
Right.
What does that look like for you? Continue the conversation. If it changes because they decide, no, I like music now. Okay. To me, the beauty of it, and I've even said this to a few different younger people, is look at your life like it's a joy to actually wake up and have decisions in front of you that you get to try out. Like, you don't have to, just because someone said, oh, you got to do this for, like, you got to be a lawyer, you got to be a doctor, you have to become a mechanic, or you have to become an engineer. There's no one set thing that you have to do these things, that you have to fit into those boxes. Just because your parents decided, or your parents decided for them that they wanted to do a certain thing, that was their choice. It was their journey, but that's what lit them up.
Right.
Maybe or maybe not, but you should do what you like. And I think that's partly why I think for the generation before me, that I come from my mom, I don't think I'm fitting into the mold of what her perception is of what young people growing up do, that what they become. Because her perception is the parents, their kids will become caregivers for them, looking after them as they age.
Right.
And her idea of what that looks like is completely different than my idea. Yeah. It wasn't that she gave me that idea, but I was always led to believe and encouraged to think for myself, be independent. Right. So that was my decision. I changed my mind that wasn't the model I wanted to follow. Right. So again, I think it's just starting at the age where, having those conversations, allowing them to start really talking about it. Doesn't mean that they're losing them being a child, but if they're talking to you about, I want to be a scientist, or I want to be an astronomer, or I want to study dinosaurs, you can still talk to them about it. Give them the benefit of a doubt that, let them know that you actually care about these things that they say they want to do. Yes. And if they change their mind, at least they're changing their mind and they're keeping you in the loop. Because a lot of parents, I think, say that my kids don't talk to me. Well, maybe it's because maybe they feel that you've never really listened. And I'm sorry if I've offended you, but maybe that's how they feel. But it's not too late to actually start reaching out and having those conversations. You have to maybe work a little harder, but That's really what it is. They will also, just like us as adults, when we go through life and we start realizing we want to do, self-development, we want to be seen, heard, and understood too. Well, just as a teenager, changing their mind because they're not sure, they're uncertain, scared is, I can't say the words online right now, but they're scared. And again, like I was scared of not having that structure.
Yes. Yeah,
Right.
I agree. And the term is scared AF, apparently.
Yes, okay. But I didn't go that far. But we know what that
means. Social media lingo.
means.
But yes,
Yeah.
and I agree. And I want to push that point home that just listen. Like, stop what you're doing and listen. And more important than that, so what I see happening with parents is I see two things happening. One, they have this idea of what their child's going to be, so they promote that to their child. You're going to be the doctor, you're going to be the lawyer, you're going to be the athlete, you're going to be this person, that person. And sometimes it's based on what the parent wants for that child, and sometimes it's based on what they think the child's interested in. And then the other parent is the parent who does listen to their child, at least at the beginning. And when their child says, I want to be an astronaut, they spend the rest of that teenager's life teaching them how to be an astronaut, not listening to the fact that tomorrow they want to be a horse rider or a horse racer. The next day they want to breed gerbils for the rest of their life. And the day after that, they want to just be a wife or a husband and not actually have a job. And the day after that, they want to be something like, they don't actually listen. They don't continue to listen as the child changes their mind. One of the reasons why we never grow up to be the fireman or the police officer or the astronaut that we want to be when we're 6 is because we change our minds. And we change our minds a lot as teenagers. And not all of us do. As you were mentioning earlier, not everybody changes their minds. Some people do, some people don't. So approaching your teenager by saying, so you wanted this last week, do you still want this week? That's going to set the expectation that they have to change their mind. If you say, so you wanted this one thing, so let's work on being that thing. Well, that sets the expectation that they can't change their mind. So the key here is listen to them. And this is what you were saying. Pay attention to what your child wants, because sometimes the child doesn't change what they want, and sometimes the child changes what they want on a daily basis. Right? Pay attention to them. Every day have that new conversation. And maybe it's not every day. Like you were saying, maybe we have the family night once every couple of weekends, once every second weekend. Great. That's enough. It doesn't have to be every day. Although the more often you do it, the more you're paying attention. It just takes a lot of energy. So maybe you don't have enough energy to listen to them every day. That's okay. Just make sure that your child, that your teenager feels that you want to know. That you want to know what they're going through. And saying that isn't enough. If you have to tell them you want to know, they haven't got the message. If you want them to feel like you want to know what's going on, ask them questions about what they're doing. Not, why are you doing that? But what's you doing? Can I participate in that with you? Is there some way I can make that better for you? Is there some way I can help with that? Is there do you need me to leave you alone? Do you need me to participate? What do you want? Is there some way I can make this experience better for you? And do you still want this experience tomorrow? Right? Is there every day ask, how can I make this better for you? How can I make what you're doing easier? And sometimes they want you just to leave them the hell alone so they can experiment and play with it. This is why kids skip. So they can experiment and play with being different, doing something outside the structure. So that's the key part. It's not about what's the right way to raise a teenager, because there isn't one. There is 1,000 right ways to raise a teenager.
Yeah, and I think you hit right on the button, or right on the nail, is we were given, like Judge Judy says, we're given 2 of these for a reason. And we have to stop telling our kids what to do all the time. Like stop using
something they've told us that they
use this less, and use these more, and really and stop to listen. But also the brain between your ears. Make sure that when you are listening, that you're not listening with a response already, because then you're not really hearing what they're saying. Again, it's really listening. It's getting to the core essence of what your kids are trying to tell you. And it could be even that they don't really have any idea at all what they want to do, which then will allow you to start exploring that with them to see what's possible. That's and if you want your kids to start talking to you more, I think that's really the way to go. But it's it can be really overwhelming, and I think a lot of people tend to think that telling their kids this is what you should do, rather than again, it's not always asking and giving them too many choices, because it's like, for me, going to there's some restaurants, and I don't know if I should say it, because if I say it then they might get mad at me, but there's one restaurant in particular where you have way too many choices. I'm not a fan of having 100 choices to choose from to eat at a place. I just am not.
I agree.
And the reason why is because when you're waiting, and especially if someone gives you enough time, especially if it's a busy place, you have way too much time to continue looking through that menu, and then you get confused. So although I'm a fan of allowing your kids to have choices, it's also, I think that's your time to be a leader, to actually lead them and let them know that you're there, to understand that I know that you have questions. I know that you're changing your mind daily because you're being stimulated by so many different things out there. There's so many different ideas now. People are telling you can do anything you want, and you can, and if that is something that you want to do, whatever it is that they bring forward, then let's explore that together, and keep that communication open, so that you don't say, oh, my kids don't talk to me. Because I think that's what kids are craving, is actually having that communication where they do get a little bit of guidance. Like it's maybe not structure, but it's feeling there's like that connection.
Yes.
And so that's, and that I think is really powerful, when you can start really connecting with your kids and letting them know that you are willing to listen to all of the ideas they have. Maybe they're changing their mind. It's not that they're all over the place or wishy-washy. It's that they're exploring and trying to figure it out. And if you can just for a second realize what it was like for yourself when you were that age, and how scary it is when you have ahead of you only a few years left to make a decision before you're put out into the world to make, to fend for yourself, kind of thing. Like you go from high school to a job, or you go from high school to college or university, and you have to make a choice on what you want to pay for the experience to learn, to go out into the world to make a living. That's really scary. And I think if the parents could just say, okay, let's do this together, let's talk about it together, and not put so much pressure on them to be the athlete just because they're good at sports, or to be a musician just because they're good in music, or to be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever that looks like, just because they're good at, math or learning or whatever that is. Just because they're good at something doesn't mean that that's what they want to do. I mean, we can all be good at a lot of different things, but it doesn't mean that the things that you believe because they're so great at is what lights them up. And that's where I think could be really a powerful moment for parents.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. I love that you said not too many choices, because I think one of the things that overwhelms, and I think there's two things two traps that we put teenagers into. And one is we tell them what they're going to be, either A, because we have this idea of who we want our children to be, or B, because they've presented an interest in something when they were 6, and we just got this idea that's what they're going to be for the rest of their life. Or maybe they presented it when they were 12 or 15 or whatever, but we stick them in a box. Whether it's the box they told us they wanted or a box we decided they wanted, we stick them in a box. And the other is that we give our kids the world of choices. We give our teenagers, you can be anything you want. Yeah, but there's a lot of things out there to be. Like, help me choose. Like, we want some guidance. That structure that you love so much, that didn't restrict you, that didn't tell you what to do, but it gave you a guide on what your options were. Right? And I was being told what to do. And that's what I felt. I was being told what to do. I wasn't being guided what my options were. I was given 2 messages. You can be anything you want, or you do this thing. Well, I don't want those options. I want to have a guide. I want to have a set of options that are appropriate for me. So how we can empower our children through their chaos of choices and mind changes and the chaos of their life as they change mentally and emotionally and socially and physically, and like as they go through all the things that teenagers going through, how we can empower them is by helping them find a few options of what they can do. Not a ton of options, a few options. Help guide them down a path that has a few options of what they can do. Now, we can even change that path, but don't change it every week. You know, when they're 13, maybe give them this set of paths. When they're 15, maybe give them that set of paths. When they're 17, maybe give them this set of paths. But I mean, let them help you choose and give them some guidance based on what their interests are, but give them some choices. Give them some options, but not too many options. We can empower them by listening to what they want, what they don't want, by actually paying attention, and then using our wisdom from living all the years they haven't yet learned to give them a few options of what they can do.
Exactly.
That's how we can empower our teenagers, by listening to them and guiding them.
Yeah. And again, coming back to not too many options, the reason why is like, even if you were to give them 3 options today and those 3 options change next year, you're still giving them the choices, but you've narrowed it down, because what they're looking for also is to have that guidance, because they don't have the life experience that you have. They're not looking for you to tell them what to do. They're asking for, hey, this is what I'm looking at, you know, and they're looking for you to walk with them as they discover whether or not this is what they want. And I think that is why I believed I had such, you know, it was really great for me to have my mom growing up who gave me that ability to just talk to her about anything. And I mean anything at all I could talk to her about. The door was always open. There was no topic off limits. And I think because of that, it really helped me to just be okay, like with myself, like I wasn't always like comfortable. I still had a lot of growth to do, but I think because she was like that, maybe I think, and this, you know, I've never really had the conversation with her, but maybe because of the open minded person that she was, having these conversations with me, something that she didn't really experience when she was growing up, but she did that with me, was it allowed me to then decide as I got older what I wanted to do with my life. Like how, you know, I actually was very bold and brave and did a lot of things that I might not have, because I felt like I had been given kind of that boost, like there was that confidence that was supporting me, that wasn't my own confidence, but someone else had confidence in me. And so I think that's really what it is. They want us to, as parents, I mean, I'm not a parent, so, you know, I'm not giving you advice as a parent, but I know what it's like to be a kid. I know what it's like to have kids around me. I mean, a lot of my life, you know, of course I have siblings, and just my experiences that I can pull on. And then just from my friends that have children and how we've had discussions around, all of these different types of topics, that it really comes down to one of the things that has been really hard for them is, well, there's a couple. One, that their kids don't talk to them. But the second thing is, and this one I think is really crucial as I think about it, not being afraid to share your past, meaning
Yes.
your experiences. And the reason why I say this is one of my friends, we were at a reunion a few years ago, and one of our friends decided to speak to, it was like just a gathering at someone's home. So, one of them brought her daughter with her, and one of our friends proceeded to tell her, do you know what your mom was like when she was your age?
Right.
And she ended up telling her some things that maybe she should not have told her, because I think really it was not appropriate for someone who she didn't really know that well to be telling her these things about her mom that should have been shared by her mom.
Right.
But that's what I'm trying to say, is that I think it has this way of developing a deeper bond if you can share with your kids your experiences around something, so that they can say, oh, so you've been there, done that. It's not that you're saying I have a past to do that too, but you're allowing them to say, okay, yeah, this is what I did, but it doesn't mean that everything turned out great from these experiences.
Right.
But I'm sharing this with you. So if you ever do experience this, number one, I want you to be able to talk to me about it. But number two, I want you to know, the possibility of the consequence, so that they get it.
Right.
And again, it's not about you keeping them from living life and learning and having to go through the experiences. But I'd rather, if I had kids of my own, that, all of my experiences around, as I said, finding my friends who were into like smoking drugs and drinking, and I decided to go along with that crowd, I would be able to say to my kids, yeah, these are my experiences. Yeah, these are the consequences. I'm not saying that this is a great path to go, but I want you to know you can talk to me about it if you ever end up in a situation, that you don't have to feel afraid that, oh, you can't tell your mother about it because,
Right.
then you feel the shame and all of that. So really, I think it's just, when it comes to how do we empower our kids when they don't know what to do themselves, is really just listening.
Yes.
And having the conversation, being open-minded, and allowing them to change their mind, because they're kids and there's so much coming at them. And be open and honest. I'm not talking about you having to share everything, but
Right.
your kids are looking to you to guide them, and they're looking to learn. And if you can at least even provide information that could help your kids even avoid something, some form of trauma or pain, wouldn't you rather do that now than have to, on the flip side of that, have to take your child's hand and hold them as they go through this trauma and pain? That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree. And the one thing I want to add to that is, we can give them the lessons we learned. That doesn't mean they're going to learn those same lessons. When I got into the crime and the drugs, and I can tell my kids about that, and they can say, yeah, Dad, I know crime and drugs are bad. That's why they're illegal. But that doesn't mean they're going to avoid them. That doesn't mean they're going to start getting into them. That doesn't mean they're going to learn the same lessons that I did. And as a matter of fact, they might need to get into those things in order to learn different lessons than what I learned.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to talk to you, that's the key. Open up the conversation, listen to them, make them feel like you care. What they're going through, what they're thinking, what they think on a day-to-day basis. Whether it stays the same for 15 years or whether it changes every minute doesn't matter. You don't know what your child's going to go through. And like you said a few minutes ago, the same kids in the same family will go through it differently. So you might have a kid who changes his mind all the time and a kid who never changes his mind at all. And in the same family. And they might be a year apart and best friends. But that doesn't mean they're going through the same experiences. So listen to each one. That's... This is a wonderful conversation. This is just the beginning, people. We're going to have more of these conversations. We're going to talk a few more times about teenagers and what it's like to be a teenager and how we can empower them, because they're the foundation of our society. They're the people who we are culturing. They're the people we are nurturing to do the rest of what we haven't finished.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so much we can do to help them. And we can't do all of that in one conversation. We talked about this before. We're going to have this in a few conversations. So
Mm-hmm.
look out for our next one next week. We're going to be talking more about teenagers and how we can empower them and what that all looks like. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate you being here for everything that we've done. Thank you, Leslie, for this conversation. Like always, and I knew this was going to happen. We have such wonderful conversations about this stuff. I love your experiences.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much. And yes, if you are enjoying this conversation, please know that we are going to be continuing. There's a series. We've decided, we've become very intentional about where we're taking this channel. So subscribe, like the video, share it around, bring your friends and your family, because this is really an important discussion. And I know that if you are maybe struggling, around this specific topic around your kids, because maybe they aren't talking to you, maybe they are distant, maybe there's something that you'll hear that could spark that step that you can take towards repairing or opening up your conversations with your kids and helping them become the human beings that you want them to become, which is feeling empowered, feeling hopeful, changing the world one step at a time, and building their life and living it and having more joy. And that's what we all want, right? So thank you so much, Andy. It's been a pleasure as always. Looking forward to next week and the next few weeks. So keep an eye out. We'll be live here again next Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern. And I cannot wait to get into that conversation. Is it Friday yet?
Right?
Thank you, everyone. Yeah. Have a great rest of your day, a great week, and we will see you again soon. Bye for now.
Bye, everybody.